Hi everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to my channel. For those of you that don't know, my name's Bintu, and on this channel I talk about everything related to trends, where they're going, where they came from, and some people that were influential along the way. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in hearing a bit more about, please feel free to subscribe, comment, and like. Let me know what other videos or topics you'd like me to do. So let's get into the video. Most sources attribute the invention of the scrunchie as we know it today to a woman named Rami Revson. Rami Revson worked as a singer at nightclubs and lounges in the 80s. And by 1986, she was looking for an alternative to the traditional hair tie that would be able to tie back her curly, thicker hair, and also didn't have any of the plastics or metals that a lot of traditional hair ties have that can potentially rip out and damage your hair. So she came up with the scrunchie prototype, and she ended up getting it patented in 1986. And at this time, she called it the Scrunchie. However, once the Scrunchie started to become popular mainstream, especially among young teenage girls, it adopted to the name Scrunchie, just because it made more sense. Alright, so now we're gonna take a look at the early trendsetters that first made the scrunchie super popular during the 80s and into the early 90s. So on this end, I have two separate pools of examples that I'm going to refer to. On one end of the spectrum, we have entertainers and musicians like Madonna, Janet Jackson, and Paula Abdul. These celebrities were seen wearing scrunchies on stage and going to award shows as well, which kind of gives you an idea of the fact that scrunchies were worn not just in a casual capacity as far as teenage girls wearing scrunchies to school and things like that, but they were also very much dressed up. So on the opposite end of the spectrum, we also have a lot of TV and movie characters that wore the scrunchie all throughout the 80s and early 90s. Some of the biggest TV show characters that we know even today. For example, Michelle Tanner, played by the Olsen twins in Full House. We also have Cher from Clueless, who also wore a scrunchie in one of her scenes in that movie. Phoebe from Friends, played by Lisa Kudrow. And the red scrunchie also made a signature debut in the opening scene of the movie Heathers, which was filmed in 1989. Alright, so now as far as the trend tied back to a lot of the trends that were already going on in the 80s, the invention of the scrunchie actually aligned with the big hair trend of the 1980s. It again provided women with a hair accessory that could actually keep their hair tied back, even when they're wearing it in these big elaborate curls. And it also had the additional bonus of being able to be worn as an additional accessory, which complemented the neon, bright, and bold theme characterizing 1980s fashion. And as far as the 90s goes, the trend seemed to be a lot more laid back. A lot of baggy sweaters, baggy jackets, baggy jeans. We had trendsetters like Aaliyah that made the tomboy-esque look really, really popular. And in my opinion, the scrunchie could also kind of fit into that aesthetic as well, because scrunchies could really be dressed up or down. You could wear a gold scrunchie and wear it with a glamorous dress, but you can also wear a black scrunchie like mine. So it can be dressed up and down really easily, which makes sense as to why it stayed popular all throughout the 80s and then going into the 90s. Alright, one example of the reach of the scrunchies trend as well is astronaut Pamela Melroy. She actually wore a scrunchie on not one, but two of her space shuttle missions in the early 2000s. During these missions, competitions, she wore a navy blue scrunchie that she later donated to the Smithsonian Museum. So that's just a little scrunchie tidbit. However, by this time, the scrunchie was not nearly as popular as it was in the late 80s. In my opinion, it could partly be because of the Y2K, more futuristic style that started to become really popular in the late 90s and early 2000s, especially because this new trend was really characterized by a lot of more rhinestones, glitter, and things like that, especially in the hair. We see butterfly clips becoming very, very popular, a lot of bedazzled accessories. So perhaps that contributed to the scrunchie kind of being seen as maybe something that you wear to tie back your hair before you get in the shower or something like that, as opposed to a hair accessory that you use to make your outfit look better, like it was in the late 80s. So yeah, going into the 2000s, scrunchies started to really only be worn by gymnasts and figure skaters during competition. All right, and then going into 2003, we can't not talk about Carrie Bradshaw, as the title suggests in this video. Of course, the primary example of just how out of style the scrunchie had gotten by the early 2000s is this infamous quote.
Loved it! Except for one huge problem. You have your leading lady running all over town wearing a scrunchie. A scrunchie!
And that's that. However, that's not to say that people didn't try to bring back this trend. In 2009, American Apparel did attempt to bring back the scrunchie, unfortunately to no avail. One of the main issues with the way that they tried to bring back the scrunchie was the fact that they were charging about $6 for each scrunchie, when at that time they could be purchased for about $1 or $2. This is an American. A lot of people didn't really take kindly to that, especially because in 2009, this was at the height of the recession, so just kind of wasn't a very good look. And needless to say, it did not work. The scrunchie at this point was just completely a non-existent trend. So much so that in 2011, David Riley, an artist, coined the term the scrunchie dilemma. Kristen Granero, a woman who authored the article Everything You Need to Know About the History of the Scrunchie, explained the scrunchie dilemma by saying this: the juxtaposition of having something so practical, useful, and therefore mature and adult be associated with something immature and unsophisticated. So that kind of explained what David Riley was saying about the scrunchie dilemma. So yeah, between 2003, really up until 2017, scrunchies remained extremely uncool as far as mass culture is concerned. Alright, now I'm gonna dive in and talk a little bit about recent trendsetters. So Selena Gomez was really the first person that was the forerunner of this new scrunchie wave, so to speak. In 2013, Selena Gomez was pictured wearing a scrunchie in a very elegant way. At this point, the scrunchie was still uncool, but 4 years later, in 2017, it made a full comeback, being worn by celebrities, influencers like Kim Kardashian, Bella Hadid, and Hailey Bieber. In 2019, Lizzo debuted the scrunchie with her pink dress that she wore at the VMAs, and that again really pushed the trend even more, I think. However, it wasn't only women that were going in on the trend. Jason Momoa also debuted a pink scrunchie at the Oscars in 2019 as well. And again, like we saw in the late 80s into the early 90s, scrunchies were also worn by a lot of TV characters in the late 2010s, including Lara Jean in To All the Boys I've Loved Before, played by Lana Condor.
Fine, you can't lose it, okay? That's my favorite scrunchie.
And Jane 11 Ives in Stranger Things, played by Millie Bobby Brown. Now let's dive into what other trends gave rise to the scrunchie trend around this time as well. The 90s aesthetic, as we all know, is extremely popular right now. So this also allowed a lot of younger people to really revisit trends like the scrunchie on platforms like Instagram and TikTok. And because of this, scrunchies also became a part of the Visco Girl aesthetic starter pack. It's funny because when I was doing my research, this was the first time that I heard about this. I did not know that was even a thing. But interestingly enough, scrunchies are a part of the starter pack. And I think one of the reasons that scrunchies became so popular among this whole demographic is because scrunchies can easily be made by reusing fabrics. So producing scrunchies can be a really great way to promote sustainability, which is becoming increasingly important for younger people today. Alright, so Sarah Radin, a writer for Teen Vogue, claimed that enough time had passed for the original scrunchie wearers of the 80s and 90s to feel nostalgic about the scrunchie, but for younger people to also start rediscovering it as something new. And especially during times of uncertainty, revisiting something that brings back nostalgic memories can actually provide people with a sense of comfort and a sense of familiarity, which is especially important given what is going on in the world right now. So yeah, going into 2021, it doesn't seem like the trend is gonna completely die off anytime soon, but I do think that 2017 to 2019 is kind of the pinnacle of the second generation of the scrunchie trend. And so I'm thinking it might slowly start to fade off in terms of popularity, but it does seem like a lot of people are kind of reinventing the original scrunchie in many different ways. So for example, the organza scrunchie. There's also scrunchie headbands, scrunchie bags, scrunchie tops, and scrunchies with built-in pockets as well that are all fairly new too. So yeah, as far as the scrunchie trend goes, I feel like now in like the social media generation that we live in, trends are probably going to come and go really quickly because the transmission of information is so quick. So because of that, I don't know. If I had to guess, I feel like the scrunchie will probably lose popularity as far as people wearing it out and about by like 2025. But on the flip side, because of this whole dynamic shift to a more athleisure, work from home, casual setting that we are living in currently, that could prolong the scrunchie trend because it fits so well into that. I've also seen brands like Lululemon creating scrunchies with material that's meant for working out. So you have people adapting to trends to, I think, make them last long too, which is something that, at least for the scrunchie trend, we didn't really see back in the 80s and 90s. Didn't seem like there was very much innovation. Really, it was just different colors and things like that, maybe different material, I'm sure. But now it's like the scrunchie trend has kind of like shape-shifted into so many different things, which is very interesting. And it'll be cool to see if perhaps in a couple years the scrunchie may not be as popular, but variations of things that were inspired by the scrunchie might still be popular. So with all that information about scrunchies, what do you guys think? Was Carrie Bradshaw right or was she wrong? I think she was right and wrong. I say that because I personally feel like they will phase out soon. I do feel like in a few years the scrunchie isn't really going to be cute and trendy like it is now, but I don't think it's as bad as she thought it was. I don't think the scrunchie will ever be like the worst thing ever to wear like it was back then. She was wrong though, because this is 2003 and look where we are now. Scrunchies are super cool, and that's the thing about trends, is they tend to cycle every 20 years. So she didn't have that 2020 vision when she made that comment about scrunchies, now did she? So yeah, I'm gonna leave it up to you guys. Also, let me know in the comments what you think. that is all I have for you guys. If you made it this far, thank you so much for tuning in. Like I said before, if you enjoy these videos, please like, comment, subscribe. I would really appreciate it. I will be here every single week to give you guys some more insight into trends. Thank you so much. Bye.